Everything's nice with him.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Blog Talk Radio, broadcasting live from the North Carolina Central University School of Law here in lovely Durham, North Carolina. I'm your host for this week, T. Greg Doucette, and this is my co-host,
Latoya Love.
Latoya Love. Today's topic, can you hear me now? California silencing protesters by silencing their cell phones. Now, before we get started, this is a First Amendment radio show. The First Amendment to the United States Constitution says, quote, Congress shall make no law, let me repeat that because those are my favorite words. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Someone should send a copy of that to California because I don't think they got the memo. If you're looking to call in later on today, the call-in number is area code 310-807-5123. Again, 310-807-5123. Or you can also contact us on Twitter using @iSpeakBlogRadio. Again, @iSpeakBlogRadio. Before we get started, we do have a disclaimer that I'm going to let the lovely Miss Love read for you.
Okay, as a reminder, this is a call-in and talk show regarding the First Amendment constitutional issues. With that in mind, please refrain from any disparaging, offensive, hateful, vulgar, harassing, obscene, defamatory, and pornographic comments. Let's keep our discussion mature and professional, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
And yes, we know it's rather ironic that a First Amendment radio show has to give that, but if we say anything like that, they throw us off the air, so please be nice. All right, so today's topic, talking about the state of California and their Bay Area rapid transit system. I'll give you a little bit of factual background. BART and BART police just kind of have a tendency to kill people. They've actually shot dead 3 folks in the past 3 years. One of them was actually handcuffed, laying face down on the ground when a police officer shot him in the back. That police officer was convicted at trial for his killing and actually served some time in jail. In response to these murders, several folks from an organization called No Justice, No BART scheduled a protest at one of the BART stations back on July 11th of this year. As the protest kind of grew in size, a few protesters started jumping on trains trying to stop them from going anywhere, and the BART system shut down 4 stations that afternoon in response. A month later, on August 11th, supposedly, BART had what they call credible information that a follow-up protest was going to take place, and they claim that the protesters were going to use their cell phone numbers and text messages, Twitter, and so on to coordinate where police presence was weakest, so that way they can go and overcrowd the stations with the least amount of presence. BART decided in their infinite wisdom that to try and stop this phantasm protest, they were going to cut off cell phone service for everybody. So if you walked into a BART station, you walked into a dead zone. The cell phone towers were completely off. You had no cell phone service. The question is that something legal? Was that something they were allowed to do under the laws of this country? Latoya, what do you think?
Actually, I want to correct you. Some of your facts are not right. They didn't shut down the cell phone towers. They actually restricted the service to the platforms. So if you were in the subway platform area, you weren't able to use your cell phones. If you walked up the stairs and you left the vicinity of the platforms, you were in the area to use your cell phone. So there's a correction.
All right, so basically, as I said earlier, if you walked into a station, you lost cell phone service.
Well, so basically what I'm trying to say is there wasn't a complete deprivation of their First Amendment rights to use their cell phones. It was just a slight burden, as you would say.
Completely cut out. You want to protest, they cut off my phone. That's a slight burden.
Well, here's my point, actually. I actually agree with their action of cutting off the cell phone service.
Why?
Because if you look at the form of a transit station, that's not reserved. It's a non-public forum. So it's not reserved for protesting and First Amendment speech. I mean, it sounds bad to say that there are areas that you can't protest, but let's be honest. In a subway system in a city like San Francisco, which is one of the largest and California, has the second largest transit system. You have thousands of people that rely on that mass transportation system to get to and from work, to and from lunch, whatever their businesses of the day. And you have people that are interrupting with their just day-to-day activities because they want to throw themselves on top of a train and protest somebody getting killed.
So, well, an interruption of data activities is when I try to use my phone and you cut off my service because someone else who might hypothetically at some point maybe try and jump on top of a train.
It wasn't hypothetical. It actually happened. They were
it happened,
jumping on trains,
yeah, a
and
month
they
ago.
had to stop the train.
A month ago. So if someone says,
that
hey,
is more of a burden. Stopping or somebody jumping on the train, protesters jumping on the train, protesters getting interfering with these paying customers just trying to get used to transportation. That's more of a burden on everybody than restricting cell phone service in a limited area, a restricted area.
But these paying customers who are lucky to not be shot dead by BART police, these paying customers are paying for the cell phone service that BART provides. BART has higher ridership because they are using their money to provide cell phone service. They just randomly cut it off because hypothetically someone might protest.
It's not hypothetical. They were actually protesting.
A month ago.
It wasn't hypothetical. It was actually happening.
Well, folks, to help us out with some of this legal analysis, we do have a special guest this afternoon, Mr. Peter Romery from East Carolina University. Give a little background on Mr. Romery. He is a dual citizen. He's actually from the United Kingdom. He's also a naturalized citizen here in the United States, has law degrees from both countries. And folks, when I tell you, he's probably the most decorated Briton since World War II. He has the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, the Longleaf Pine Award here in North Carolina, the Order of the Silver Crescent from South Carolina. He's an honorary lieutenant governor of Alabama and Oklahoma, an honorary Texan. The list goes on and on. We'd actually go through the entire show just going through all of his awards and accolades. Peter, are you there? Can you hear us?
I am here. Can you hear me, Greg?
Yes, sir, we can. How are you doing today?
I am doing very well, thank you. Having been evacuated from the East Carolina University campus where we were on lockdown, but all is clear now, all is well at ECU.
Excellent. So if we hear gunshots, that's not the BART police.
It is, no, it's not the BART police, no.
I'm glad to hear that everyone's safe. Now, what is your take on this? We'll give our readers a little bit of legal background. When it comes to restricting speech, the United States Supreme Court has had a long string of cases on when the government can intervene. And kind of the key case here is Brandenburg versus Ohio. And what the court held in that instance is that in order for the government to infringe on someone's speech rights, the speech that they're targeting has to be directed to inciting imminent lawless action and likely to produce that action. So you have these three prongs. You have to have the intent, it has to be imminent, and it has to be likely to occur. Taking that in mind, Peter, what is your sense on BART's activities?
Excuse me, for 1 second. I'm sorry, Peter. Let's not forget the form analysis that's also involved with First Amendment speech, according to the Supreme Court, where distinguishing between a public forum that is strictly reserved for speech and protesting, and then non-public forums such as transit stations that are not reserved specifically for speech purposes. Peter, can you chime in, please?
I will, and Latoya, your analysis of the law is exactly correct. You're spot on, and you articulated incredibly well. However, from my perspective, unfortunately, you're wrong, and I apologize for being so brash in that regard. My view here is that the forum that we're talking about is actually over the airways. The forum that we're talking about is the ability to make phone calls, to send text messages, to send to Facebook. This is prior restraint as well. And I think that they fall down, I would argue, on all of the prongs of the Brandenburg test. And I'll step aside from the constitutional analysis for 1 second to say that they also, from my perspective, violated the Communications Act of 1934 as amended, and the Telecommunications Act of 1996, in that they were impairing telecommunications service that was provided without a court order or an order from the FCC. But here we had something that had happened in the past that these police officers said they thought might happen, and that's the best they could get to. They thought might happen or could happen again in the future, and as a result of that, they decided to yank the plug. And they decided to deny rights not just to those who might protest, They weren't just coming in and saying, okay, we're going to cut off the ability of these folks that we've identified as troublemakers. I think even that would be problematic. They decided to cut it off for everybody. So if, for example, I had been in a lockdown situation, as I was this morning on the BART platform and trying to get in touch with a very concerned family member, I wouldn't be able to do so because the plug had been pulled by these folks who were trying to prevent themselves having to exercise their correct duties and enforce law and order through usual means rather than unusual means of pulling the plug on a cell tower.
Well, let me throw out a hypothetical here. You know, BART's response essentially is that, hey, once you pay, you enter this paid part of the station that's different from the unpaid part of the station. Once you're in the paid part, you can't protest. It's against the law. We refuse to allow you to protest. My question is, if someone decided to walk onto a BART train with a sign on their back saying, "Don't shoot me, please," you know, clearly that would qualify as protest. How does BART plan on restricting that? What's your response?
Well, there again, they would be wrong. They can't do this. They can't say you can't protest. Now, time, place, manner restrictions, as we all know, those are enforceable. But they can't say blanket, you can't protest. And I won't mention the actual words that were written on the T-shirt, but we're all familiar with the case of the young fellow who walked into the U.S. Post Office with an expletive, "the draft," on it. And in that case, the U.S. Supreme Court said, you've got a right to do that if you want to. They can't have it always. They cannot say that this station, which is public property, it's publicly owned, maintained by an area transit authority, they can't say you can't come in here and express your opinion. A private business may very well do that, but the government can't. That's what's at the very heart of the First Amendment, from my perspective. The government cannot say to people, you are not allowed to protest. That's just wrong. That's unconstitutional.
Now, Peter, I'm sorry if I may interrupt. Now, you brought up the time, manner, place, reasonable restrictions. Now, if you look at, once again, back to the forum analysis, if you look at the uniqueness of a transit system in San Francisco, thousands of people have to rely on that mass transportation every day. Would you say that it's not reasonable for the BART police to try to restrict protesting where people are jumping on trains, they have to stop the trains from moving? That's not reasonable to try to act to curtail those actions? I was asking Peter.
I mean,
it's
that's
reasonable.
Peter, hold on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, will do.
I was going to say, this isn't about stopping
Greg.
people from jumping on trains. The police can stop people from jumping on trains. This is stopping people from picking up their phone
but
and saying,
them jumping
hey,
on the trains was a form of them protesting.
But no one's saying we should
So
allow them. No one's saying we
the
should allow
whole
them.
issue here is protesting.
Well, okay, now that you bring that up, there's a whole issue here. Go ahead, Peter.
I'm just going to say, Latoya, again, you're a wonderful advocate, and I would hasten to add, I believe that here you're somewhat playing the devil's advocate. But what you have here is the police who are saying, well, we don't like what we think might happen, so therefore, and it is just thought, and so what we're going to do is prevent anybody who is on our platform from using their cellular device. That's wrong. Now, can they stop people from jumping onto trains? That's their job. That's their job. If lawlessness breaks out, it is their job to try to prevent it. But they can't say in advance, well, we think this is going to be said or that's going to be said, and so therefore we're going to ban any attempts at any type of protest. That's just wrong. That's inappropriate. It's unconstitutional. And they knew it going into it, or they wouldn't have sent out this inartfully written apology afterwards, where they were backtracking tremendously from what they had done. They were wrong. They knew they were wrong going into this, and goodness only knows what would have happened if somebody was having a heart attack on that platform, or if somebody had to get in touch with a family member immediately. They would have prevented that from happening. They threw a huge fire blanket over a very tiny amount of smoke, and it was wrong.
Yes, and I understand what you're saying, how that did pose as a burden onto the regular paying customers and someone who might have had an emergency. But once again, the BART police did restrict contain the cell phone banning to the actual platform. So if you walk just past the platform, you would be able to use your cell phone. So in an
And if
emergency,
I was
it's just a matter of
and if I
walking a
was
few feet.
unfortunate enough
So
to have
it's
a
not a
heart attack on the
complete,
platform,
yeah, so it's not an undue burden and it's not a complete deprivation.
Folks, while we're having a great
so
discussion
if
here,
my
sorry, hold on, Peter. I do want to announce again, if you guys want to call in and express your own opinion, area code 310-807-5123, or feel free to tweet us your questions. iSpeak Blog Radio. That's at iSpeak Blog Radio. Peter, go ahead.
I was going to say, so if I'm unfortunate enough to be having my heart attack on the platform, or if I'm disabled and am restricted to waiting on the platform, I'm one of those who has to have my speech curtailed, whereas the fit, healthy, and those who are able to move about, they're okay because they can go elsewhere to speak. This is not what the First Amendment says. The First Amendment doesn't say, tell you what, if there are other places where you could go to exercise your free speech, then what the government's doing is constitutional. No, it guarantees the right to free speech.
And that's
this was
correct.
far too broad.
But the First Amendment is also not absolute. And the government, in certain forms, do have the right to regulate the speech that's taking place in forums, especially a forum where the primary purpose is a subway and not to conduct speech, where a subway is not traditionally held open for speech, and where perhaps protesting, where people are jumping on trains, would be incompatible with the usual functioning of the mass transit system that thousands of people are using.
Well, I want to dive in because we're not talking about the protesters jumping on trains. That's not what we're talking about.
It's a part of their protest,
You know,
so yeah,
we're talking about
that.
The Supreme Court has said that the test for dealing with prior restraints, the test for dealing with speech in general, is subject to strict scrutiny analysis. All right, which means it has to be narrowly tailored to achieve a compelling government interest. All right, let's assume for the sake of argument, trains running on time fits the compelling interest. You're cutting off my cell phone service because someone else wants to protest. Now, the Supreme Court's already ruled on this fairly recently in NAACP versus Claiborne Hardware Company. It's a case involving Medgar Evers and a issue with a picket line and so on. What the court said essentially was
picket line where?
Gosh, this would have been down in like Alabama or something.
Yeah, I mean, like where were they? Where was the
well,
it
was at a hardware store.
Okay.
So it was a private area, which you can actually regulate more than a public area. And what the court said essentially was that if you're part of a group of people and one of those people happens to break the law, but you don't, you are not responsible for it. We can't sit here and hold you responsible for someone else's actions. What you're saying essentially is that because, say, for example, Jillian wants to protest, she jumps on the subway train, you cutting off my phone, that's perfectly okay. That's absurd.
They weren't cutting off your phone. You were able to use your phone in a different area.
If I left the station.
You were not completely deprived. No person, whether it was the protester or a regular paying customer, was completely deprived of their use of their cell phones. First of all. Second of all, I would actually argue with your use of analysis with this particular forum. This is a non-public forum.
So you're telling me that if I put a sign on my back saying, "Don't shoot me, please," you could regulate it because it's a non-public forum?
Perhaps they could.
That's absurd.
It's let's look at the totality of the circumstances.
We'll go ahead and go to the phone lines now. We have the Honorable Andrew Dempster, caller 6907. Go right ahead, sir. You're on the air.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks for having me. First, I'd like to say that I also agree with Ms. Love. I think that this is a not traditional public forum. I mean, we're talking about the platform here. We're not talking about outside the train station where they can protest all they want. So I think in the essence of where they are on the platform, where they're trying to protect not only individuals getting on the train, but their employees and the protesters themselves, that they're going to be able to infringe on the First Amendment rights there. Secondly, I think what's missing here is I don't think BART is saying you can't come in and bring a T-shirt saying, "BART, don't shoot me." I mean, the problem is what the protesters were going to do and had done in the past. I mean, they're going to interrupt. They're not going to peaceably assemble here. They're not going to wear shirts, hold signs. They're going to chain themselves to buses, interrupt the flow, totally mess up the whole transactions and the way that business goes. Like, if I read the article correct, which I think I did, they were trying to do this during the busiest 15 minutes time of the day. So they weren't trying to just make a little statement. They were trying to mess some things up. And then going into some other to have is they didn't cut complete cell phone service off like Ms. Love was saying. They just cut off on sections of where the platforms were. They had police officers there that had radios of people in contact if they were help. They also offer a free service of phones that you can use, so no one's completely cut off the communication. And as I stated before, you could walk right up the steps and use the phone if you want to. I mean, the problem, even in talking about it perfectly, Brandenburg versus Ohio, I think this is a perfectly acceptable reason of why they can do this. I mean, this is directing or inciting and producing imminent law of action at its finest. This is what they are trying to do. They're not saying, hey, let's go peacefully assemble here. They're saying, hey, let's mess up the transit system. Let's tie ourselves and chain ourselves to buses. So, I mean, I think this fits perfectly in the Brandenburg, Ohio application.
No.
Thank you, Carl. I appreciate it. Oh, hold on. Before we get there, though, I do want to address a couple points, Peter, and then I'll let you dive in. You know, this whole idea that they didn't completely cut off cell service is just erroneous. You know, the towers are in the station. They are powered by taxpayer dollars to provide cell phone service. And BART just flipped the switch. We just cut power to the transmitters. And, you know, okay, hypothetically,
Actually, it's
protesters...
It's a fact. They didn't completely turn off.
They cut off the towers.
They
So,
didn't.
you know, the protesters, they say the protesters want to interrupt. No one has any information about this. All we have is BART's word that they supposedly had credible information of a potential protest. If you go on Facebook, there's nothing there. If you go on Twitter, there's nothing there. If you go on Google, there's nothing there. All we have is the government shutting off cell phone service and saying after the fact, a week after the fact, oh, trust us, it's okay, we didn't violate your First Amendment rights.
Again, if I know my facts correctly, there was you're acting as if they just cut off the protests the moment, I guess, they anticipated a protest, or cell phones, excuse me, the moment they anticipated a protest. There was a series of protests that was that was going on over a series of days, and they decided, yes, to cut off or to restrict cell phone service, especially when they saw the crowds were getting bigger with the protesters. You had people jumping on trains. They had to stop trains. They were worried about the traffic on the platform. And of course, it's their duty to regulate the traffic and to maintain the welfare and the safety of not only the protesters, but the paying customers. Once again, thousands of customers that use the mass transit system every day in San Francisco. So,
right, and it's the customers paying that had their rights violated by the phone being cut off. All right, let's go to the next caller. We have caller 3030, who is actually from California. Caller, you're live on the air.
Good morning. I called because I have been riding BART for the past 27 years. And
let me ask you a quick question. Have you ever been shot by BART police?
That's irrelevant.
No.
Ma'am, can you please keep going?
No. However, what I'm saying is there's no possible way you can cut off reception to the platform and not affect it for the public, because BART is in public areas. BARTs are connected to buses. BARTs are connected to the airport, because you can get on Millbrae and get to SFO. There's no way you can possibly do that. I've been riding BART for 27 years. And then I heard that we're doing the protest because of protesters. I do understand that. You kind of want to limit the protesters. However, let me tell you about Oakland Raiders fans. Oakland Raider fans are, there's just a bunch of them, and they get really wild and really rowdy. But what BART does is they have extra trains and they have precautions, so they won't do that. So people can still get to where they're going. BART have other alternatives.
Oh, well, that's actually a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. Do you have any suggestions as to what alternatives they could have taken in place? I mean, my colleague over here just keeps focusing on them shooting people. You know, we wouldn't want them to, I guess, cause some type of violent disruption, and then somebody else gets killed, and then we're here talking about what happened there again. So what kind of alternative would you suggest?
Okay, these are my suggestions. When Oscar Grant was killed, Meserly, he was taken off the force, but the people around Meserly were not. And there came a time when BART police needed to be trained, and they were trained by the people who was around Meserly when he killed Oscar Grant. So I think our training, for one, BART police have they have too much power. They have too much power. They shouldn't have guns at all, because BART is not a place where it's needed. You know what I'm saying? And so another precaution I think we can take is what we always do, and that's when we have extra trains. We have other ways to facilitate protesters. And what I'm actually shocked and appalled at learning that BART actually did this. just cutting off cell phone reception to everyone. So, I mean, I just couldn't believe they would do that. And so I just think there's other precautions. We can have more training. We can have better people training our police. There's other ways than just cutting off everyone's First Amendment rights.
All right, Carl, we appreciate it. Thank you. Peter, go ahead.
I make a rather novel suggestion here, and the novel suggestion is this: is if a criminal offence is committed by somebody, prosecute them for it. This is prior restraint. Not only is it prior restraint, it's illegal prior restraint. They violated at least 2 statutes when they did this. This has happened before in California. Earl Warren himself, when he was the Attorney General, tried to block the phone, the home phone of a man suspected of illegal gambling. That was found to be unconstitutional. Prior restraint, we know this. The Supreme Court will not uphold prior restraint. It doesn't work. It is far too big a sledgehammer to crack far too small a nut. And my suggestion is this, is if the people solicited others to commit criminal offences or incited others to commit criminal offences, and they actually occurred, they didn't just occur in a dream or the wish think of some BART police officer, they actually occurred, then you prosecute them. That's what we do. We prosecute people after they have committed illegal acts.
Okay.
We don't go squelching free speech.
I'm sorry, Peter. I hate to.
I'm going to talk over my colleague.
One question. Just got to get one last question.
Okay, go ahead.
Peter, I just have one question. Just going back to the whole the protesting issue. What alternative means would you suggest that BART police could have taken instead of cutting off cell phone service?
Well, hold on. I don't even think that question is necessary.
It is necessary, especially if you're talking about compelling
People who
interests.
commit criminal offences don't start to block off cell phones for everybody. Because if I'm in there and I'm in a family emergency, then I want use of my bloody cell phone, and you better
But
not
what
stop me.
what alternatives are there that wouldn't
The biggest alternative is arrest people that commit the crime.
What alternatives are there that wouldn't incite violence?
I don't have to give you an alternative to know that what
Yes,
they did
you
was
do.
illegal.
If you're sitting here saying compelling interest, strict scrutiny, you have to sit here and discuss alternatives. So, what's an alternative?
That's like saying, why don't we lock everybody up who we think might commit a crime? I mean,
this is not Minority Report.
I'm just saying, what's an alternative?
All right, we're running short on time. We're going to go back to the phones. We do have a few more callers in the queue. Caller 2482, you're live on the air. Go ahead. Caller 2482.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You're on the air.
Yes. I'd like to go back to Peter's statement earlier. It appears to me he's arguing that the police had to wait until the protesters come in to really settle things down. And when you put exactly what happened in perspective, you know, a homeless man was shot, you know, a poor person, he was not armed. This is a recipe for disaster. So if the police in this case cannot take any measure to prevent the protesters from coming in, and really, I'll tell you what, I mean, more people would die had the police allowed everybody else to come in and protest in there. So I'm not sure what Peter's argument is. If the police should have waited until the whole movement, the whole protest started before the police started to settle things down. I'm not sure what his argument is.
All right, caller.
So you're saying that
go ahead, Peter.
On the basis that the police are incompetent, we should restrict people's free speech rights. We think the cops are incompetent and can't properly enforce the laws, so therefore the First Amendment goes out the window. That's a fatuous statement. I'm sorry. What I'm saying is that police should do their job and wait for a crime to be committed. If it's committed, then arrest it.
So you're saying that
seconds.
I hate to do this, but I've got to cut both of y'all off because we're running a little short time. I do want to say, though, recently, 2002, Ashcroft v. Free Speech Coalition, the court said the mere tendency of speech to encourage unlawful acts is not a sufficient reason for banning it. Essentially, because BART claims they might potentially have some information about a protest, they cut off my cell phone. That's okay. I think that's preposterous. Absolutely absurd. But I do want to thank our special guest. So you want the last word? Go ahead.
I do want the last word. Because actually, and I will make this quick, because there are a lot of actually school cases out there, and schools are also non-public forums, just as transit stations, which said that administrators don't have to wait for unlawful conduct to take place before they start regulating speech. So I just want to leave on that note.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You're still wrong. Peter, thank you for joining us. We greatly appreciate it.
May I just say you're both excellent advocates. You're brilliant advocates, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Glad everyone is safe out in Greenville. Please give them our regards. And y'all, again, blogtalkradio.com/iSpeak for future shows. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Good show, you guys. Good show.